over the years, we've seen tons and tons of awesome and creative events across Solus Lab 2, Solus Lab 3, LEGO's Island, LEGO Master 627's Creations, and even the Backyard 2. I feel Solus Lab 2 is probably one of the best examples when it comes to so many insane and creative events, as we've had that world the longest out of all of these. And don't get me wrong, LEGO's Island also still has some absolutely incredible events as well. But if you take a look at recent years when it comes to stuff like LEGO's Island and Solus Lab 2, for pure examples, you may notice how a lot of them mainly reuse a lot of events, and not too many original events. This was mostly the case between, I want to say, 2019 all the way to 2022. At least this is what I can recall. I take that back. That mainly dates as far back as 2017. For Solus Lab 2, that is. So why did a lot of these years mostly feel the same? There were a lot of years that kind of felt the same as previous. Like, for example, 2017 mostly felt like the same as 2016 with only a few minor new events in there. Same can also be said with 2021. But why did it end up like this way? And why weren't there that many new events? And even in the last few years, actually, what potentially caused all of that? In this Saturday Stories, I will be gladly going over that. As to be honest, that's also a question I've been also thinking of myself. Why was it like this? I've been questioning that for a long time now, actually, myself. The one who makes the events, after all. I sometimes question, why were there not that many new events these last few years? Well, without further ado, in this Saturday Stories, episode 134 to be exact, we're going to talk about exactly that. Let's jump into it. So, one thing that could be clearly stated, between 2017 all the way to, I think, 2022/2023, a lot of the years felt the same in Solus Lab 2. What this mostly consisted of was mainly bringing back mostly the same events from previous years, just putting them in different months. And actually, it kind of felt like that in Solus Lab 2 for actually quite a long time. I don't know if you ever realized that. But do pay attention, actually, because it is true. If you don't go into the Solus Lab 2 free and LEGO's Island event playlist, you'll actually realize that. And only very rarely in that timeline were there completely new events. Most of these years between that timeline mainly were just repeated events in different months, with only at least 2 to 3 new events in each year. That's basically a good rundown for you. And then these last few years, 2023, and even 2024, and even in 2025, you might have noticed a complete shift. Like, here's an example for 2024, the New York party. That was never seen before, and that was a Solus Lab 2 thing. But going back to our original topic, why did most of these events return every year, just in different months? Well, one of the main intentional reasons could be mainly because of one reason. Because these events worked. I was able to come up with fun, unique ideas for them every single year for like a good 5 to 6 years. Take, for example, the Underwater Expedition. This was an event infamous for coming back every single year from 2016 to 2021. It never skipped out on a year. Okay, it only skipped out on 1 year for the lab, that being in 2018. But it never skipped out on a year for LEGO's Island ever since it was introduced in 2018. That was, of course, up until 2022 when we finally decided to take a year off. But, again, as the Underwater Expedition as a pure example, this was mainly because an event like this worked, and I had a ton of creative ideas each year that I ended up doing for the event each year. For example, here's 2021's footage. You could clearly see my intentions here were just full-on underwater themes. Now, of course, in these original events, these were mainly caused by their respective villains. For example, in 2021, this was mainly caused by Master Evil Unkers at the time. You see, events like this worked for a while because we had enough creative ideas to make them interesting. Sadly, after 2021, we didn't have any ideas anymore to make them interesting. So that's why we took 2022 off for the Underwater Expedition. The same can be said for Solus Lab 2. 2021 was the last time we had an underwater expedition. This was mainly because by the time that event rolled around for the 6th year, I was already running out of ideas to make it interesting, and I feel the event ran its course by then, which is why it didn't come back in 2022, and hasn't returned ever since. Another pure example of this is Lab of Doom. This was an event infamously for coming back every single year for like 6 years in a row, which was finally killed off in 2022. So you basically get the idea here. Most of these events mainly came back every single year because, well, they worked. We had enough unique ideas for them to keep having coming back every single year, and not really needing to come up with any new events to really keep the year going. But as the years went on, we ran out of ideas for events like this, which is why they were eventually scrapped. But not entirely, they'll probably come back again one day. Like this and the Underwater Expedition, for example. Once I found out that all these events were basically just overdone at that point, my next goal for the next few years was to try and experiment with newer events. For example, take the Festival of Lights 2023 in Xolazap 2, for example. That was never seen there before, and that's where the creativity started coming. In more recent years, like 2023, 2024, and 2025, the originality finally started to come back. Because by then, a lot of the events that we had done since 2015, 2016, and 2017 had practically ran their course by that point, to the point where they were being overdone, taking away a lot of the time that we could have been doing newer events. Like this, for example. You could tell that starting in 2023, we actually wanted to take things a little more seriously and actually start cramming in newer events like the Winter Luau, for example, instead of just doing a mission-based event every February. This mostly could have been after what happened in 2022, where we had the infamous Operation Villain. And while that was an entirely new event at the time, it costed us to lose the lab temporarily. But also starting in 2022, we also started putting in some new events like Operation Villain, which can be seen in this footage. Yeah, main goal of the story here, mostly the reason behind the lack of new events from like 2017 to 2021 mainly could just be because we just had events that just worked and had enough creative ideas for. And we didn't really need to come up with new ideas because the events that we were already doing already worked. But of course, eventually ran their course when we got to 2021 and 2022, respectively. Which is why the last few years have been trying to get more new events in there. And even starting going into 2023 and 2024, you've actually been seeing a lot of new events lately. Like the New York Party, the Christmas in July Party, the Festival of Fruit, Operation Clones, Operation Multiverse, all of which have only been done in the last 1 to 2 years. You may realize this, but the originality has actually been coming back over the last few years, and that's actually really awesome. And see, I also am here to announce that even heading into 2025, now with Xolazap 2 and 3 officially reopened, I can confirm that not only after the events of the ongoing Operation Reality, but I can confirm that while we were on break, I actually have been coming up with a lot of new and unique event ideas that you will be seeing throughout the year, replacing a lot of the events that would normally come back every single year. So see, the originality has actually returned, which is awesome. And I'm actually genuinely excited for you guys to see all of this. We actually have originality again, which is awesome. And you're going to see that all throughout this year in Xolazap 2 and 3. And not just Xolazap 2 and 3, but Lego's Island as well. Operation Reality being one of them. Yeah, you may realize over the last few years, they're actually getting more and more original, as I'm finally starting to come up with more unique event ideas that I haven't been able to do in previous years. When I realized that a lot of the events had finally ran their course, I realized I needed to start getting creative again, which is exactly what I've been trying to accomplish over the past few years now. And I'm hopefully assured that you have been noticing that. I hopefully am hoping that you guys have been noticing that over the past few years. And I can also assure you that just like Xolazap 2 and 3, Lego's Island is also getting some entirely new events later this year after LEGO's Island Summer's over that have never been seen before. Some of them will coincide with each other, but most of them will be entirely different from each other. But I am here to announce that most events throughout the remainder of 2025 are going to be entirely new. The creativity has returned, and that is legitimately awesome. So maybe the Zola 2 and Free Break was good after all. It actually gave me time to come up with something creative. So the break was worth it. And that's all I need to say. Before I ramble on any longer, and also before it is midnight in the next 22 minutes, I am going to cut the video here. With all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. And the next Saturday Stories will be on May 24th.